All right. Wes, Marshall, thanks for joining us today.
Yep.
Got some people slowly rolling in. Appreciate you all joining us today to give people about another, 30 seconds to get in here. I'm going to throw a poll question. Today's going to be all about cybersecurity, about your family. Typically, we talk about your business, but today is all about your family, and we want to know more what your family looks like. So please let us know the age range of your kids that you want to protect online. And we'll give about another 40 seconds or so for people to join. If somebody could, that's out there listening, throw something in the chat just to let me know that I've enabled that and it's going to work.
Yep. Let's see, Randy's there.
Thank you, Randy. We had a small snafu with our calendar invites, so I think we should probably go ahead and get this thing going. What do you think, guys?
I think we do it.
Sure.
All right. All right, so thank you again for joining us today, you guys. My name is John Clark. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing at ABS, and I will be the moderator. That means I'm going to watch the chat and the Q&A section, making sure that our two experts get to you guys and get your questions answered. Today's webinar is going to be recorded, and I'll get it sent out to all of you guys. So if something comes up, you need to leave, don't worry about it. We'll get a copy of the recording, as well as a document that has a bunch of takeaways for you guys to take some action after this. As I said before, typically when we do these things, we're talking about your business risk when it comes to cybersecurity. But today we're going to focus on something that's more important to you all, and that is your family and how to keep them secure on the internet. I have brought with me today a couple of IT experts as well as some seasoned dads. They're going to help us understand things we can do to protect our family while they are on the internet. And the first person I want you guys to meet is our Director of Cybersecurity, Wes Johnson. Wes, give us an introduction and take it away, buddy.
Yeah. My name is Wes Johnson. I am as John said, Director of Cybersecurity over here at ABS. And that in itself doesn't necessarily qualify me for this conversation, but I have raised two children to nearly adulthood. One is already an adult, the other one is 16. So I've already definitely have my experiences with trying to keep them safe and trying to keep them educated as far as technology goes. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to go over in this webinar, and really we're just going to be hitting some high levels of things. It'll be scratching the surface on some of the topics, because almost any of them could be a rabbit hole that you could kind of go all the way down through. But at the end of this, as kind of John said, there'll be a takeaway that'll include resources to direct you to look into additional things. But I'm being joined today by Marshall Fall. Marshall, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the group about you?
Sure. Thank you, Wes. So my name is Marshall Fall. I'm the Director of Client Success here at Advanced Business Solutions. I am a proud father of 5, and my kids range from age 23 all the way down to 13. That includes 3 girls and 2 boys. 2 of those children are still at home, and that would be a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old girl. So I claim to be an Uno champion at our house, card trick extraordinaire, love telling dad jokes. I've been a coach for over 25 years, and I've been married to a wonderful lady for 26. Wes, one of the things just want to preface is my wife and I have been dealing with this technology world in digital safety for about 13 years. And bro, we have some serious battle scars and wounds from how we've dealt with that. But the good thing is we've also got a lot of victories. And so today, we're going to share some of that. And because there's days when we want to take every device out on the front lawn, throw them in the air, take a shotgun and just destroy them. But then there's other days where technology has really helped us as parents, whether it's tracking a kid going across the country in their car, or if they're out with their friends, they can reach out to us immediately. Just awesomeness when it comes to technology, but it's also very nerve wracking. And so today, it's really, how can we give you a nugget? How can we give the audience just one thing that can help jumpstart them in this journey of technology with kids? So what you're going to see today is a blend. It's a blend of education. It's going to be a blend of stories and some tools and resources. And as Wes mentioned, we're just scratching the surface. So hopefully today you'll get some tips and tricks. Maybe a few dad jokes may come out of that, which actually is kind of funny. John, last night, sorry, sidebar here. I went to Kroger on the way home because, you get that infamous text from your wife saying, hey, pick up these 3 things. And one of them was watermelon. And I thought, I was thinking, why do melons have weddings? Have you ever thought about that?
They have
John?
weddings? I didn't know melons had weddings, Marshall.
Do you know why?
Do they have weddings?
They don't, because they can't elope.
You guys should know that
that's-
Marshall is a dad joke extraordinaire. These jokes happen on a daily basis in our office, and I love them dearly.
Funny. So let's get real here. Let's see, my mouse got lost. Here we go. One of the things that I want to preface to everyone that's on here is I get it, right? Parenting is a tough job. And oftentimes it's inconvenient, right? But also parenting is an amazing thing. And so as we roll through this today, I want you to know that no one knows your family better than you do, okay? So the pressure from technology is overwhelming. And we have to be diligent in protecting our kids and communicating with our kids, letting our yes be yes, our no's be no. But what I want to preface here is that whatever you gather today, remember that you can morph this, you can cater it to your family and the special needs that you have. And I also get it that in today's world of yes parents, right, where it feels like people are allowing their kids to do more than ever before, it's okay to say no. And regardless of what you use as a parent to guide technology in your home, you're always going to have critics out there, and you're always going to have what we call armchair quarterbacks that have their way of doing it. But I want you to know, don't worry and don't bend to the peer pressure, right? You're responsible. So just go with it, right? Don't worry about what other people say. Hey, John, did you get any of those poll results back?
Marshall, no, something unfortunately happened to the poll and we don't have any results to share. I'm sorry.
That's fine. So let's just assume that, we're talking about, really kids between the ages of, say, 5 to 19. That's sort of what we feel is sort of the breadth of what we're talking about. Wes, man, what is everyone concerned about right now? What are parents really concerned about?
Yeah, and actually, I think that it's kind of interesting as raising kids with technology through those elementary school years to middle school to high school, and then even after graduation. You as a parent are generally concerned about different things at different points. This graph that we have here in front of us has some statistics about what parents are concerned about. And really the 2 big buckets here is too much screen time and access to inappropriate material. That's predominantly what they're running into, which I think that kind of you throw those 2 things together, and that, yeah, I would agree that that's probably what I would be looking for as well. One thing I will say is if you did have middle school kids or kids that are starting to struggle with a cyberbullying, you've got the 8% about children's behavior and 7% about their behavior to others. And then also I would probably lump in that communication with strangers as well. The kids are communicating with each other in that middle school area, but they're also kind of targeted by predators. So really, and we're going to hit on this multiple times, that really what needs to be done is communication with your children, make sure that you meet them at the level that they're at, and make sure that it's not just a one and done conversation. It needs to be something that they know is important, and that you're talking to them on a regular basis. And that'll allow you to be able to touch on some of these concerns in the appropriate time that those kids are aging. So, but yeah, the two big buckets are you know, definitely screen time and inappropriate access.
Yeah, and you know,
Yeah.
those stats, Wes, and as well as these right here are what I call very eye-opening, right? Everyone can read what these are, but I want to highlight a couple of them. You know, I've got 3 girls, right? As a dad, I can still remember the first time it was a grown man, you know, kind of looked at my 13-year-old daughter with these eyes, and I just remember this protection mode that I just went into. And it's scary. And, you know, if you see here, 78% of the victims are girls. I've got 2 girls left at home. But what's also scary and is real, and why I hate all males, just kidding, is a lot of the predators are male, right? 82%. The other thing, too, that I want to highlight is around cyberbullying. Doesn't matter what kind of school you go to, where you go to church, where you live, and what neighborhood. Cyberbullying happens whether you're a kid or you're an adult, right? I see it all the time. And, you know, a lot of times it shows here, you know, a lot of kids have already been cyberbullied, but then you see the flip side, there's a lot of our kids that are doing the cyberbullying. And then the other one, Wes, that I want to bring up is this sexually explicit words or images. And it doesn't matter if we're an adult or we're a child, you cannot get away from it. It's everywhere, regardless of the parental controls, you're bombarded. And so part of being the parent is when those things happen, how do you talk to the kid about that and how to manage and navigate it? All right.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, just to kind of build on that real quick with the 60% of explicit, sexualized words, images, and such. I remember years ago, we did a project for a client. It was a church, and they had us do a content filtering for their entire network. And then we got a call shortly thereafter that some of the teenagers were coming up with, sexually explicit images in the computer lab. And when we kind of looked into it, we found that the content filtering was doing exactly what it was meant to do. They were going through like a Google image search and typing in keywords there. And so really you can't block Google at that point in time. And it's basically just identifying that there is where there's a will, there's a way. And that's one of the things, again, in kind of the different age groups that you have to kind of watch out for. But one thing that I did want to kind of touch on with this and the points that you're making about, the victims primarily being female, perpetrators being male, the cyber predators that are out there. I know we've all seen the Dateline, to catch a predator kind of thing, where they are trying to go and physically meet them. That stat there of 98% of online predators never actually meet their victims. Because a lot of the times they're not trying to meet them, they're trying to get those victims to send information or images or whatever else to the predator. So again, it's one of those things of, you can have your kid, in the house safe at night, but if they have screens in their rooms and you don't know who they're talking to and they don't practice good behavior, it doesn't matter physically where they're at. It's already happening online. So, and we'll get into some of those, some recommendations for educating and going through that shortly.
All right. So that kind of, and you mentioned it's all about communication, right? And it's so critical. I had a friend tell me he's got 10 kids, and he told me one time, when you're talking to boys, boys are, their heads go all over the place. He says you have 90 seconds. Whatever you say in those 90 seconds is what they hear. That first 90 seconds, everything beyond that is want, 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 want. So when you talk about clear communications, know your audience, right? Know the age of your child. So So what are some other things that you think, Wes, that, it comes to this, that we should talk through?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good things on this list of just communication and expectations. Internally at ABS, we talk about expectations very often. We find that to be mandatory in operating a functional business, and also to set our clients' expectations. And if you kind of turn inward and look internally to your family as like your own enterprise, you're the CEO of your family. Setting those kind of clear expectations from an early age and continuing to do so throughout the age of the child is very important. It's not a one and done thing. It's something that you can potentially be talking about on a regular basis. But ultimately, you got to keep that dialogue open. You got to be having those kind of conversations. You got to talk about the risks. They have to understand that they are a target. Just like in real life, stranger danger. Well, that applies with online presence as well. Privacy is not what it used to be. And things that get out there are out there forever. So kids with access to internet, to social media, to posting and everything else aren't really realizing the longevity of some of their actions, but it definitely it's definitely there. But yeah, I know that Marshall, you've done the technology agreement with your family for quite a number of years, and I think you've got some examples of that to kind of go through with us.
Yeah. So having 5 children, the oldest being 23, and I even have a grandchild, right, who's coming up in this world. My wife and I remember where we came across it, talked about, really setting healthy boundaries, right? I mean, like I think we talked about earlier, and I don't think I used this analogy yet. I mean, you wouldn't have a football game with no refs and no rules. It'd be chaos, right? To me, when you get a device and you have access to the internet, boundaries need to be set. And so one of the things that we did is we created a healthy technology guideline for our family, right? This can be catered to yours. And what I'm showing you here is just a small snippet of what that looks like. It's about 1.5 pages. But the idea behind this is that it gives us something to guide us in talking to our children about technology, right? And so, for instance, it's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to have a phone or an iPad or a computer. It's not a necessity. Yes, there is for some school reasons, but you don't have to have those things. And so, what we do with our children is we walk through all of these different points, and it's an open dialogue, and we'll share stories with things like everything is public. And I'll share with them, previous company I was with, people were coming on to be potential hires, and I'd go back and we would look at Facebook, or I can't remember what it was called back in the day, something like
MySpace.
What was it?
MySpace.
Yeah, it was MySpace. And I remember this guy presented himself one way to us, and we're like, man, he's solid. And then when I looked to see what he's doing outside of that, it just really concerned me. And what I tell the kids is, when you're out in the world of social media and wherever you are, you're not only representing yourself, right? You're representing your family and your friends and your school and your work. And so what you post and what you do, it's important. And so this guide allows us to talk through all these different areas that are age appropriate. But I think the key, Wes, that I want to share is at the end of that, we actually sign it and we have the child sign it. And the reason we do that is it says, hey, I heard you, I understand. And this always gives us that document to go back to if we're ever questioning something, we can always turn back to it and say, hey, here's what we agreed to. Number one, a boundary was broken. Here's the consequence that we agreed upon. And not make it legalistic, but really to make it real, right? To make it real for them.
Well, and kind of what you said earlier with talking to boys, and I have 2 boys, so your 90-second rule, yeah, I kind of wish somebody might have told me that a long time ago, because you're right. Yeah. But when it also comes to my oldest has got or thinks that he's a lawyer, but it had to be something that we had to have a conversation with and put things down in writing so that we did have that to reference back to, because his interpretation would be fairly loose with what he thought that the deal was. But there's a couple of things that I like about this particular agreement. I became familiar with agreements like this through the Boy Scouts of the BSA, the Boy Scouts of America. They have a cyber chit, which is basically just an age appropriate kind of education on using digital resources and social media and everything else. And we'll include the links to some of their work in our takeaways. But that was the first time that I became familiar with a technology agreement like this. But with yours, you specifically call out no secret passwords, and I think that that's a really smart thing to cover, because you're the mutual sign off of this and acknowledging the fact that we're not going to have secrets from each other is a fairly important thing, I think. And it also, as a parent, like your child can expose your house, the rest of your family to outside danger if they aren't being careful, and you obviously need to know that. And so you need to have full access to whatever resources they have until you can be sure that they've matured to a point to secure things appropriately. But agreements like this, calling out things like that, I think really does get on the same page with them early on.
Cool.
Yeah,
Good.
sorry, Marshall, you guys, both of you all know, but our audience does. And I am not a father, but I find it interesting what you guys are talking about, of clear communication, setting expectations. And now you're talking about an agreement with your children. This is the life I live in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do to have good relationships with our customers. How do your kids react when you put an agreement in front of them that tells them how they're supposed to act with technology, and that they actually have to sign it? Like, that has to be an interesting situation.
Well, it is, right. The older they are, they're like, what I have to do? Well, yeah, you do, right. And I think once we go through it with them, it's really good. But here's the thing, John, is actually it's a two-way accountability, right? The kid can always say, hey, you didn't, this wasn't outlined, right? And they'll find some gray areas. And then we can, change it. But I think it's accountability both directions. And we explain that to a kid. A lot of things in life revolve around something like this, and we're not doing it, legally. We're doing it as a way just to make sure we're both on the same page, because things get muddied, as Wes said, all the time, and interpretation can get changed, and this keeps it clear.
And and frankly, from a business point of view, John, I know that you're perfectly familiar with like an acceptable use policy that you may have as a leader within your organization, and that really is just setting the guidelines of what's appropriate, how you can use the company's technology. This is really, frankly, just a microcosm of a similar kind of agreement. But it at least allows for the conversation to happen rather than being reactive. This gives a certain proactivity that you can build those boundaries and accountability from, and kids need that.
Yeah. So Wes, here's the thing, right? So we're talking about passwords. Passwords are just frustrating, right? We've got so many, we've got to remember so many. We do a really poor job of making them strong. Oftentimes, this can create a bad habit, which the cyber criminals love to exploit. And what are some of the common mistakes or misperceptions people have about passwords, and how do we manage that?
Yeah. So I know that in a conversation we were having, you were saying, how are you going to remember these complicated passwords and such? And my advice to you was, you don't. You use something like a password management system. That's what my family ended up doing a long time ago when password management systems started to become more prevalent. We started to record everything into a single account, and that allowed us to, every time the kids came home and they had, every year, the school year just started. So kids have been bringing their syllabuses home, and the parents have had to like read through it and figure out what accounts they're going to need to have access to and sign up on things. Whenever we were doing that with the kids, we would always record those passwords and use generated complicated passwords, and then use our management system to be able to keep those in order. But I would much rather advise a family to start doing a practice like that early on, rather than using things like the kids' names, the dog's name, the birth dates, the street names. It would be one of those things that you know, we just aren't able to remember, 12 to 16 character long complicated, unique passwords. Unfortunately, people will start to reuse passwords that they use. They're going to use stuff that they can remember quickly. And in business, that creates a lot of issues. But Marshall, you had a story about how your all's I think it was your wife and yours like parent control password, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I did is when we were preparing for this is decided to interview some older children, some ours and some that weren't ours, and just ask them, man, how did you beat the parental controls, right? How did you get access to the things that you got around that? And it was really kind of eye-opening. Number one is when you've got your phone and you have parental restrictions on there, you have usually a 4-digit passcode. Well, I thought I was really sly with mine, and I put it in there. Well, my daughter somehow saw me, and I thought I was hiding it. She saw that, and then she shared that with her brother, who then they had access to what they wanted when they wanted. They could add and delete apps without me knowing it. And so I thought I was smart, right? Reality, and if I could take a mulligan, I'd change that password more frequently. Secondly, one thing that we used to do, and a couple of kids that I spoke to did, is their parents would have a Google sheet or an Excel document that they'd have password protected. It didn't take the kid hours to figure out what that password was based on the things that you just talked about, Wes, dog names, birthdays, whatever. They were able to crack that and have the keys to the kingdom on passwords. Yeah. And so my advice and recommendation there is use a LastPass or something like Wes was talking about. If not, to just change whatever that code is very frequently, and it can help you.
Yeah, I'll build on that real quick, and just I had a note here to remind people you should be changing your passwords at least annually, if at all possible. And there's some systems that can help with that, but for years mine has been New Year's Day. I'm usually off work on New Year's Day, and I will sit down and I'll reset all of my banking and my social media, and just basically reset any password I can get my hands on, just so that I know that they're not like legacy passwords out there. So that's another thing that you probably should build into your plan there.
Yeah. And so at home, I live in a house. At one point we had 8 children, 8 total people living there, and people coming and going all the time. I've not been that great at securing my home. Not in the past. I'm better now. What can you tell us about how can we keep our home safe? What are some best practices and tips that you suggest?
So some of the in the build up to this webinar, I was kind of recounting how I set things up, and I understand I have a technical advantage there, but there are, again, some resources that we're going to include links to later on. But one, I would say you need to have a home router that you can manage from. And by that, I mean, you have your wireless. What we did in our house was we created 2 separate wireless networks. We created one for the adults and one for the kids. The adult ones, we put all of our standard stuff on there, the Fire TV, our computers, our cell phones, our printers, or whatever else. We basically use that for like the secure network. And then the kid network, that was the only username and passwords that they had was for the kid network. And if they had broken part of an agreement, or if they had not been doing their chores, I would literally, from the office, because the router that I bought, I made sure I could manage it from anywhere, I could log in and just change the password to the kid network. Once I did that, all of their devices stopped working. And so they were basically forced to cooperate in order to have the privilege of having Wi-Fi. So that's one thing that I did. Another thing on this list here is about admin accounts. You should treat your IT as like you are the administrator on it, and set an administrator password and then create individual passwords. Like, so for example, if you have a family computer in the family room or something to that effect, have the administrator account separate from what account the kids log into. That'll be helpful for a couple of things. But if nothing else, that at least gives you a backdoor into a computer that they don't have access to.
And Wes, for those that aren't very technically savvy, I love my wife, but she would, right now her head would be spinning. I'm sure there's, YouTube videos out there that say, hey, here's how you set this up, or there's direction on how to potentially do that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the takeaways. There's a YouTube link that goes through and they kind of talk about it in a high level. Of course, every device is going to be different, but at least they talk about the different settings that you could implement.
Right.
So they're not terribly difficult, and a lot of the modern home router companies had tried to make it as easy as possible for people to manage.
Hey,
Right.
Wes,
So yeah.
got a quick question from Chris in the audience. It's back to your password management that you were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
Is there a difference in terms of safety between the password management tool like a LastPass and a password protected file?
I mean, yes. Password management systems allow you to be able to use it essentially anywhere from your mobile device, from your computer, from wherever. One of the things that I have set up with my family is they have their own account set up where they can input the password, but they actually don't know what the password is. I control what the passwords are, but because the app is set up for the kids, they can basically apply the password without actually having to type it all out or know it all. The other thing that I like about password management systems are the auto generator. You can just auto generate a very complicated password very easily and apply that and update your tools. That's one of the things that I've struggled with in the past. And early on, my kids were born in the early 2000s. So early on, yes, I just had a sheet that just had all of the different ones, but it became a little bit laborious to keep track of and keep updated. And when I started using management systems, that really did make things more versatile. My wife also is not technical whatsoever. She gets on her phone and that's about it. But she knows how to get into the password management system. She knows how to launch and get into all the different applications from there. So it just gives us, it provides a certain ease of access. We have one very complicated password to unlock the vault. And then from there, we can work through whatever we need. Yes, they have breaches. I think at this point, all of them have, and just like any other technology company, they're going to have breaches. Just because they've been breached doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad choice or a bad direction. But I do think that, again, changing your passwords on a regular basis is an important step there that a lot of people kind of skim over sometimes. But the LastPass compromise that happened back in December, they dumped a lot of vaults. They had a lot of passwords. And really, frankly, the solution there was you needed to go through and update your stuff. So it's a good habit to be in. If it makes sense for your family to just have a sheet, if you don't have a whole lot of stuff, yeah, sure, of course, use that. But that's something that you can do.
Yeah, let me throw this out, Chris and Wes, just on that last point. So one of the things I asked one of the cyber engineers here was, if you have an Excel with password protected, is that a good thing to have? And he kind of looked at me and was like, no, because there are all kinds of ways for someone there's on the internet tells you how to get around that. So I'd be real careful doing that going forward, just because it kind of scared me, honestly, because that's what I'd always done. So I think, John, you used to talk about risk tolerance, and like in your home, you can have a lock, just a bolt lock on your front door, but some people want a bolt lock with a security system, with cameras, with attack dogs. And so it's really around your risk tolerance. What are you willing to do? And so, that's something I think, Chris, you'd have to decide on your own, but definitely have something I would recommend.
I was going to say, it doesn't have to be those systems, but I've found it to be definitely a game changer for myself.
So Wes, last week, I flew home to Charlotte, visit my family. I was working at coffee shops. I was in the airport. I was plugging into, there's the charging stations now that they have at the airports and everywhere else. I'm assuming since I did that, that's a safe thing to do when I'm out to do those sorts of things, or click on QR codes, or join public Wi-Fi's. Is that a good thing or not?
No, we're after this, Marshall, we're gonna sit down and talk about some good safety steps that you can do.
Okay.
But it's a great question, and a lot of people experience this while they're on the go. And we did include this as one of the big things, because you have your mobile device. I mean, that's what everybody's working off of and running around with. And so a couple of things on there. Public Wi-Fi is one of those things to be cautious about. And the reason is there's plenty of examples, especially in airports, or classic example, where somebody with a backpack with a router inside of it will go and they'll kick off a free Cinnabons wireless network, and people will join it and they'll start to do the different stuff because they think it's from the business there, but really it's all routing the traffic through that criminal's router, and they can skim username, password, activity, where you're going and logging into, and it's a potentially concerning thing. So I personally am wary about Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, just because I have no way of validating whether or not it actually is legitimate or not. So I try to be cautious with that. If I have to use something like that, I'll use a VPN on my laptop or my phone, just to encapsulate. VPNs are basically, if you're not familiar with them, it's like a private tunnel between yourself and where you're going to. It just prevents a lot of skimming that can potentially happen there. So if you're going to be in a position where you're a road warrior and you're going from place to place, one, I would say have a good data plan and use that as much as you can. Unlimited data is a pretty common thing, I think, at this point. So there's not a need to jump from Oasis to Oasis of Wi-Fi. And then two, if you are going to have to use it, just make sure that you've got, a good VPN tool on your device. The other thing I would say about that is biometrics. On our mobile devices, I think I initially had that in this one, talking about when our kids got new devices, we would set up a username and password onto the device for two reasons. One, if they, they're kids, if they lose it, somebody can't pick it up and get into whatever the heck they had in there. But also two, if somebody was trying to skim or remotely manipulate the device, if there's no passcode set to it, there's basically nothing stopping somebody from remotely manipulating the device. So passcodes and biometrics can be really helpful in that sense. With biometrics, my tip here is, if you are setting up a device for your child, usually you can store 5 or 10 biometric fingerprints in your phone, or facial recognition. Make sure that you store yourself and your spouse, the parents have their own biometric access to the kids' phones. You should also know the manual password to the device. And again, there's no secrets, so it doesn't change that password. If they did, you still have the biometric method of getting into it if you've got a hostile situation.
Yeah. Two things, Wes. I've got a QR code up there in the corner of the presentation. Man, these things are popping up everywhere. And I've been places where it says, hey, scan here for the menu, or scan here to access the Wi-Fi, or scan here, take, this QR code. And I've heard stories, right? I've heard horror stories about how, you're unlocking by clicking on that and not sure what it is, potential dangers. Is that accurate? Yeah.
I mean, basically, what that QR code is going to do, in most cases, is going to take you to a website. Basically, it's like clicking on a link. You're just scanning it, and automatically your phone is told to switch directly into wherever that link was. So yes, it can be a malicious site that it's taking you to. It can also automatically download and install an app on your device. And depending on how your app settings are, that app could have permissions to things you don't want it to have permissions to, such as your microphone or your camera or your photo reel. So it's one of those things of the QR codes coming out. It makes it very convenient, but they are being used for malicious reasons. I know there's a restaurant that I go to that still has the QR code menu. I know the restaurant, I go there frequently. I trust it. I'll scan it, no problem. But if I was in an airport and it had something saying like click here or scan here for the Wi-Fi, no, thank you. That's too much of a risk for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so social media. All right. Man, this is such a huge topic. And there's so many apps and so many things. It is so hard as a parent just to keep up with what's going on. You see it, you've seen the Snapchat fiasco years ago where everyone thought those pictures were deleted and they got hacked and then released. There's just so much. And I think kids, and I think adults too, right? I think we don't understand the negative or the scary parts of social media. And so as parents, what are just some ideas and things that we can do to use social media in a safe way?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I like on this particular one, that coach your kids or coach your children. I think that, again, we've talked about communication and setting expectations, but you're also training your kids to think critically, think analytically, be suspicious. Don't just like believe whatever you're seeing. We teach them that anyways. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. In the world of social media, all of these lessons apply, and they should understand the fact that social media is basically advertising and marketing for many things nowadays, and that there's a bias and a motivation that's behind it and everything else. So you need to teach them to think critically about those kind of things.
Yeah. Real quickly, Wes,
Yeah.
again, my brain's going here. The other day, I remember in Facebook, there's this sort of answers and questions that people were sending around. It was pretty fun because, it was like all my friends and people I went to high school with. Yes, John, back in the horse and buggy days before you make a comment. But it was saying things like, oh, what was your first car? What's your favorite color? What's the first concert you ever went to? And all these things. And it was really fun to go through and, write down all that and see what people were doing. But then my healthy suspicion got the best of me. And I'm assuming I was wrong by filling that out. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you throw in your mother's maiden name and your birth date, and you've basically hit all the security questions that you need to access or to reset your bank password. Be suspicious about those kind of quizzes. Yes, they could be fun. And if you do want to take them, okay, fine. But you probably shouldn't publish your results to all your friends because, as we well know, there's plenty of people who have access to your social media that you might not actually know. Or it could be a fake account. So quizzes for fun, great. But be aware that, like, if they're asking you a bunch of stuff that sounds like security questions, don't publish that, and probably don't even take that test. The other thing that's on this list about being aware of like tracking locations, we've been telling people for a long time that, like, hey, if you're on Facebook and you're going on vacation, don't post that you're going to be out of the state for the next 10 days because you're going to Orlando. Keep that to yourself, post the pictures after you're back. And that's easy to say, but then if your kids are on Instagram and they're taking pictures and posting all the Instagram stuff, like they're basically doing the same thing of announcing that nobody is home. So be careful of that kind of stuff as well. And then, again, the internet being redundant, once you post it out there, it's essentially out there forever. So you have to be careful with like what that is. Again, kids think that they're invulnerable initially, and you've got to remind them on a regular basis that there are long-term repercussions to your actions.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? All this information has been awesome, and it's really been good to set the stage, throw some tidbits out there. We're going to kind of shift gears here a little bit, and we're going to get into showing you some of the resources and tools that you as a parent can use, and some ideas and some tricks that you can use to help make things better. Wes, I want you to kind of talk through gamifying.
Yeah, I came across this years ago. I don't know who this mom was, but I love her spirit. She basically did a similar thing that I was kind of mentioning about, like having a separate Wi-Fi. But she tied it to her kids' chores, and she even like would specifically put something out that they had to like include in the photo so that like she knew that it wasn't being reused. It's almost like a hostage holding up a newspaper with the dates across it. So very clever mother, very smart. And I also like the thing that like she says, thanks for playing, may the odds be in your favor, reference to the Hunger Game type deal. So she's treating this as like if you choose to engage, you can get the Wi-Fi password. If you choose not to, that's fine too. That's your choice. But ultimately, it provided something that I bet that she had pretty good results from doing this kind of activity with her kids.
Yeah, and Wes, my wife and I always have told our kids, right, you choose blessings or consequences based on the choices you make, right? What I want to throw in here is that reward your children when the behavior is right. For instance, they come across something that's not good, and instead of them hiding and sneaking it away, they actually come to you and talk to you about it. And you guys work through it. You don't give them a consequence. You could actually give them a reward. Hey, proud of you. I'm proud that you brought that to me, and we got to talk through it. Man, let's hit the graders, or let's go do this, or here's extra 30 minutes tonight that you can spend on your device. So I think praising them when they do good is also a good way to sort of gamify it, if you will.
I heard I'm reading a book called Essentialism right now, and they had an example in there of giving tokens out every week. They would give 10 tokens out. The tokens were good for a half hour of screen time, or they could cash it in for $1. And if they did good stuff throughout the week, they would get more tokens. If they read a book, they would get a token. If they did certain activities and everything else, and they did that basically gamify screen time. And by doing that, they immediately had a change where the kids' behavior was trying to get the tokens so that they could get to the screen time, which is the positive behavior that they wanted in the first place. So they built in a gamified positive reward system. So I thought that one was pretty clever as well.
I love it. One of the things that my wife and I have always struggled with is the plethora, that's a big word, John, plethora of apps that are out in the marketplace. And it's been so hard to stay up to date with what is what does what's appropriate, what's not, what's, all those things. And so we came across a site, it's called Protect Young Eyes. And this is what you're seeing here on your screen, that list a ton of apps, like everything from your Marco Polos, Snapchats, Netflix, whatever the app is, chances are it's on here. And the cool thing about this site is you can click on an app. And for instance, this one, we clicked on Snapchat. And so it'll bring up that app and in a video telling you as a parent what it is, right? And what are the good things about it or bad things? Is it safe? Is it not? What do you need to know as a parent? And to me, this is sort of that game changer, because you can ask your kid, hey, what is Marco Polo? What is that? Is that like a pool game, right? I play pool, right? Swim, Marco Polo, right? But it's not. It's a video messaging app. And so this is a phenomenal tool. So we'll send you a link to this, but it gives you an idea of what apps do and what's good and not good about them.
And I like this one for another thing that we talked about briefly was app permissions. Like, what does the app have permissions to do on your device, and what kind of privacy settings can you choose to do? And I believe this site kind of goes through and talks about that kind of stuff. Or even if there's one of these that it doesn't, at least you know that the app exists, your kids using it, why they're using it, and then you can research that further.
Yeah. And another one that we want to share with you is one called Bark, right? With the device, you can manage a kid's device with this, and it does everything from monitoring content to managing screen time, all these sorts of things. And it's no different You can do that with an iPhone now, right? It has that, but it's not as robust and it's not as powerful. And so an application like a Bark or a QStudio, there's different ones that are out there, can give you that extra layer of protection. And one of the things that I want to share with you is on this site called SafeWise. SafeWise has a list of all the different parental control apps, right? You can ask people and you'll just get a ton of different answers. But this is great because it puts it all in one place and it allows you to, I mean, you can see it, right? It's just a grid
Yep.
view of how things work. And it's just a phenomenal way just to kind of prove. What have you used in the past, Wes?
Yeah, I know that your family is mostly iPhone. Our family was mostly Android. And we used Google Family for, I mean, I think I've probably been using it for 10 years. And it would do the, tracking, the app permission, the screen time, the bedtime. The bedtime stuff was quite handy there, even to the point of I could make it set off an alarm. I could, to find their phone. And I never really had to use it to find their phone, but whenever I would call and they wouldn't answer because they had fallen asleep, I would just start hitting that button over and over and over again. And so I used it like an alarm clock to wake them up. But the Google one I thought was pretty good. If you have an Android device, you have to have a Google account anyways. And so by using that, it was already built in, but it also allowed us to do parental management of the browser, make sure that they weren't storing passwords in their Google account and things like that.
Yeah,
So
I know
it had a couple of advantages for us.
Yeah, and I even know from an adult perspective, there's a couple men's groups that I've been part of, and there's an app out there called Safe Eyes, and it's where you actually can give visibility to your friend about the things that you're looking at on the internet. Like, so you can't hide what you're doing, and so a lot of these apps have that accountability packed in there, and that's one of the things I think is so strong is, people do things in the dark that they wouldn't do in the light. And so these parental apps help you manage and gauge that, see where people are going, what they're doing, as a way of one, monitor, but also if they're going the wrong direction, it's the coaching moment, right? And teaching moment. So there's a lot of resources that are in the marketplace. It's a ton. And like we said, we've just, scratched the surface. And today, we've talked through, showing you Protect Young Eyes, Bark, SafeWise. U of L, right? U of L has a great social media article on the mental health of social apps, right? And does that apply to children? Yeah. Does that apply to you, me? Yeah. So it's really a really good article. And then another one from Southern California is, some additional ways to stay safe on social media. And we'll be sharing those out. And also, hey, Wes, I know with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's one that we're tightly integrated with, right, with what we do as a business. And so
yeah, they're part of Homeland Security. The mission is to do cyber and infrastructure security, and they have a lot of outreach to businesses and everything else. But frankly, in this particular topic, I mentioned it earlier, my kids were scouts. We went through BSA, and every scout leader had to have training for safety, child safety training. But they also, BSA built in a lot of the digital safety training for the kids to do together as a group. The part of the incentive was if they did get it, they could have, just like they would have to do a safety course for a pocket knife, they would have to do a digital safety to be able to have a cell phone on a camping trip or something to that effect. So I like that particular resource quite a lot as well. Experian and like credit bureaus, they also usually have a lot of good resources about safety, digital safety and such.
Yeah, and the good thing too, with a follow-up we'll do for everyone is we'll have a list of what everything is with a link to them with all of these. So it'll be really good for you to find. Hey, John, I know we're getting close on time. Is there any other questions that may have been thrown out there that we didn't see?
No, sir, there are not. Thank you for asking. I think we can wrap it up.
Awesome. Well, I think as we finish up, I think we want you guys just to take away everything that's on the screen right now. We know it's real. We know it's not changing. Well, it is changing, and it's going to be harder. But the key thing that I think we want to communicate to you is that don't get discouraged, right? It takes a village to do this. And we want to be part of that village for you. We want you to tap into us and say, hey, you talked about this. Can you give me more detailed information? And so I want you to know that you're awesome. Parents are awesome. It's hard, but you can do it. We have faith. Your kids have faith in you. You have the authority to just to guide your family the best way that you can. And so all of us here at ABS, we want to help people. That's what we love to do. And we hope you found that one nugget, right? That one thing or two or three that you can take back now and go, okay, I'm going to kickstart this idea of managing technology and cyber in my world. And so we want you to know you're not alone. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. We appreciate you taking time out of your lunch today to talk with us. And you got that one dad joke. Hopefully you can use that. And Wes, anything you want to say to everyone before we leave? Or
Nope, I think that you wrapped it up well.
awesome. Well, thank you, John. Thanks for moderating, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week.
Great job, you guys. Folks, we'll have another one of our cybersecurity webinars soon, but we'll be back to business topics on the next one. Thank you again for your time. Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks.